Now looking at a different section of elasticity, this is income elasticity of demand. So we're going to look at how to calculate income elasticity of demand. We're going to look at the relationship between YED, income elasticity of demand that is, and normal and inferior goods. And we're going to look at interpreting these figures and what affects these figures as well. So income elasticity of demand, as you could guess, is to do with your income. So I always get students to think about, if your income was cut or increased suddenly, what type of products would you maybe buy more of? Are there any products that you would buy less of as well? What are you likely to cut your consumption of? What are you likely to switch your consumption of to? And those types of things. And this becomes really very relevant when we're looking at income elasticity of demand. So income elasticity of demand is the responsiveness of the quantity demanded to a change in income. Remember, the most important thing here is that we're changing the income first of all, and then we're observing how the quantity demanded responds to that. So we can get a few interpretations from this. We can get, we're going to see that it's elastic and inelastic, or we're going to get inelastic and elastic figures, but we're also going to be able to tell if something's a normal good or an inferior good. So a bit of a link back to when we were looking at demand as well. So income elastic, and this is where the percentage change in the quantity demanded is sensitive to a change in income, and income inelastic, where a change in the quantity demanded is insensitive to change in income. So it's the same as with PED. If something's income elastic, just like it's price elastic, it's going to start with a number, 1, 2, 3 point something. If it's income inelastic, it's going to start with a 0. So the equation is very, very similar to PED, but the only thing that has actually changed here is, rather than dividing it by percentage change in price, we're dividing it by percentage change in income. So here we go, a nice example again, looking at egg sandwiches, because I love egg sandwiches, and we're looking at what happens when income changes from £100 a week to £90 a week, and as a result of this, the quantity demanded changes from 200 to 250 units a week. Now, even I don't think I could eat 250 egg sandwiches a week, but let's have a look at what happens here. So we've got, it's very important that we're putting the signs in for YED, and you'll see this in a second, but we've got a change of £10, and that's a £10 decrease, so we've got a minus figure there, and the original was £100, so we can see that that's a minus 10% change. And then we've got a quantity change of 50, and the original was 200, so that's 25% change. So if we put 25% over minus 10%, we know we're going to get a negative figure out because they're moving in different directions, and the figure that we're going to get is YED minus 2.5. So it begins with 2, so we know it's going to be elastic, so it's sensitive to a change in income. But it's also a negative figure, and we can tell something about this as well. Now, if it's a negative figure, it actually means that it is an inferior good. So an inferior good, remember from when we were looking at demand, is where income increases, demand for it would decrease, or the other way around is when income decreases, we see demand increase, and this is what we're seeing here. So there are actually 4 different combinations of YED. So it's either going to be elastic, sensitive to a change in income, or inelastic, insensitive to a change in income. And you can also tell by the sign whether it's inferior, and that's if it's a negative sign, or if it's positive, it means it's normal. So if income goes up, quantity demanded goes up. If income goes down, quantity demanded goes down as well. So sometimes, just to point out a common mistake, some students think that if it's inferior, it has to be inelastic as well. That's not true. It could be elastic and inferior. It could be elastic and it could be normal if it's a positive number. It could be inelastic and inferior if it's a negative number. It can be inelastic and it can be normal. So there are actually 4 different combinations that you can get to interpret these YED figures. So all very interesting up until this point, but why is it important for businesses? So I've pre-written some stuff out here. So in the long run, businesses probably want to have more positive YED figures, so these are normal goods, because over the long run, incomes tend to rise over time. So just think to 100 years ago and think about the average income in the UK 100 years ago, I think it's very safe to say that it would be much less than it is now. So we tend to want, businesses will tend to want normal goods over the long run. However, we know from the economic cycle go through times of recession, so this is negative growth, and this means that incomes are falling, and so you might want to have a larger range of inferior goods, so YED negative goods at those times. And you will have seen that if you've looked in the supermarkets over the last few years when the UK went through the recession. So they would have had items such as kind of smart price and value ranges, and dine in for £10. Those types of deals might have been considered inferior goods. So that's looking at normal and inferior goods. But in terms of elastic and inelastic, well, elastic goods, if they're positive, they tend to be more luxury items and they're very sensitive to income changes, whereas if they're inelastic, they're usually necessities and they're insensitive to income changes. So I think it depends really on the business and what they want, and the type of market they want to be in. Certainly if it's a more inelastic product, you're probably going to have more kind of constant demand, whereas if it's very elastic, it is very sensitive to price changes. So the more of the luxury goods market, as long as it's positive, that is, more the luxury goods markets, and you tend to have big rises in demand when you've got boom times of the economic cycle. So that's YED.